Hey guys, this week our assignment is about abstract photography. So what the heck is abstract photography? The word abstract has lots of different meanings. You can have an abstract way of thinking. You can have abstract writing, abstract painting, abstract photography, abstract ideas. So there's a million different actual definitions of the word abstract, and they're all kind of different in their own way. So the one that I found, the definition I found that I liked the best is actually this one right here, and it says something detached from physical concrete reality. So it's not quite real, right? It's something a little different, a little odd, a little out there, right? So this is a painting by painter Salvador Dali. He did a lot of surreal, abstract things, which is kind of crazy. And as you look at it, you can maybe recognize some things or see some things that remind you of other things, right? And make you wonder, like, what is this about, right? And then you also start to, like, observe things that he has in here, like his lighting and his colors and his patterns and his textures and symbolism and that sort of thing in his abstract work. So there's a lot of different ways to interpret the word abstract. This is a painting by Pablo Picasso. And in this painting, he keeps some recognizable parts. You can recognize an eye and a lip and a nose, right? But he rearranges them in a non-realistic way. And then he adds other elements. He's adding other shapes and lines and patterns and colors that just aren't right. They're not realistic. But we get a sense of what he's trying to communicate here in this work. Then there's artists like Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock created these amazing, giant mural-sized paintings. And his paintings were focused solely on colors and textures. And he wanted us to see the globs of paint. And he wanted us to see the brush strokes. And he wanted us to see how he made this piece. And he didn't try to make anything recognizable within them. That's what Jackson Pollock did as an abstract artist. So a small, quick history. Abstract art started in the early 19th century after a large movement in art called Romanticism, where everything was focused on being super realistic. So all the painters painted in a way where everything, every little teeny detail was super realistic. And if you think about it, there were no cameras at that time. So paintings were all we had to show us what the world was around us. And so we often went for things like this. This was like a super realistic painting of a still life, right? And this is what artists used to do back in the day. But then we moved to things like this, which is also a painting of a still life, an abstract painting of a still life. So this photograph here, this painting, maybe you recognize some things, maybe you think you recognize some things. I think I see a guitar and maybe a face in the background, I don't know. But you're not really 100% sure. It's not 100% realistic, right? Not at all. So where does photography fit in here? At first, photographers were competing with painters, thinking that photos needed to look like paintings to be considered artwork, because abstract art and photography were kind of coming into the world at the same time. And a lot of photographers thought in order to be considered an artist, their work had to look just like the paintings everybody else was making. So they used to do crazy things like put Vaseline on their lens to make the photographs they took look more like a painting. And quickly, many photographers decided that didn't need to be the way that it was. And they started to use photography to document anything that they saw that was realistic and interesting. So they started doing what was then called straight photography, meaning like right off the camera, like right as it is in front of you, not editing it in a way that made it look like a painting or anything else, just showing you objects the way that they were, because that's the great thing about photography, right? We could document the world around us. They started including objects anything they found interesting. And they started shooting light and angles and textures and all kinds of objects and just looking around them and observing and shooting what they saw. And a lot of times this led to making their images of realistic objects not look realistic at all. So this is how abstraction made its way into photography. Abstract photography is my favorite thing to do. It is what I have found I have actually done unintentionally throughout my career as a photographer. And so I'm going to share some of my work with you. This photograph right here is one of my most recent ones, and I took this one last summer with the drone. So I'm now using the drone and the extreme angles of like aerial photography to create things that are abstract. So taking something that you might see from your feet and your eye perspective and immediately know what it is if you get above it and you photograph it like this, then maybe you don't know what it is. Maybe you do know what it is, but maybe you don't know what it is, right? And that's my favorite thing to do, is to kind of confuse the viewer. Because in photography, you expect to see a photograph and you expect to know exactly what you're looking at, because that's what photography is. It's a documentation of what's in front of you. But taking a photograph that should be realistic and making it abstract is like one of my favorite things to do. I like to confuse people. So here's a couple of my other pieces. Couple years back, I used to take photographs like these, where I would take a photograph and I would actually mirror it in Photoshop. So I would flip it, I would duplicate the one photograph and flip it over and line it up with the other one. So in these ones, I'm using editing. I'm using Photoshop to create the abstraction of my photograph. This one in the bottom right, I duplicated 4 times and flipped it sort of in a pattern, right? And it made different interesting repetitive patterns. Angles. I use extreme angles a whole lot in my photographs to abstract them as well. Oftentimes when we go outside, we do a nature project where we all go outside, which I'm pretty sad we're not going to be able to do together this year. But I guess we all did go play in the snow, and that was fun. So, but when we go outside and take these nature photographs, I find myself taking my camera and putting it underneath things. Like I take it and put it real close to the ground and shoot up underneath plants and stuff like that. Not looking in the viewfinder and kind of shooting blindly a whole bunch, and then I look through them and see what I get. And I think they're really fun. They're different. There's something that you would never see, because you never have your camera at that angle, right? I also like to look straight up. So this other photograph, this black and white photograph, is looking straight up, focusing on textures and, light and shadow and lines and compositions and that sort of thing. You can also use movement to abstract your photographs. So you can move the camera while you're shooting, which creates like intentional camera shake, right? That's what the light painting on the left is. Actually, I moved my camera to make those lines. And I was reading something last night that says that you could use your live photos on your camera or your iPad or your iPhone and create long exposures. We might explore with those a little bit more too. So you can move your camera while you're shooting, right? Or you can have your subject move while you have a long shutter speed and it blurs your photograph, right? So this photograph down here on the left, this is a very young Grace, and she had moved multiple times in the image, right? So I see 3 noses and I see 3 faces and a whole bunch of different eyes and lips and stuff, which makes it really kind of creepy. You can also use double exposure. So you could take more than one image in one photograph. A lot of cameras have an option to take double exposures. Like you could choose, I want to take 2 or 3 or 4 photographs, and you take all 4 of those photographs and the camera actually puts them all on top of each other. That's what I did for this photograph. But there's a ton of apps out there where you can create double exposures. You can take a couple different pictures and put them together. You can also do it on Photoshop too if you want to. Where you take the opacity down of each image and layer them all on top. These are two photographs by two super famous photographers, Edward Weston and Paul Strand, who started the abstract movement. They started to photograph everyday objects, and they focused a lot on light and shadow and textures and shapes and curves and that sort of thing, to take these objects that are just ordinary objects and abstract them. It's kind of why I thought this project would be super fun for you guys right now, because you're at home, but you can abstract anything. If you look around, if you're sitting down, you look around yourself, there's probably like 20 different things you could take right now from your arm's reach and abstract them and shoot them in a way where we can't really tell what we're looking at, and we start to look at things like textures and colors and patterns and light and that sort of thing instead of the object itself. Oops, sorry. One of the most popular ways to abstract is to get close, right? Get close to the object. Show us, when you get closer to an object, it turns into those elements instead of the object itself. So we're not looking at what the object is, we're looking at all the elements that make up the object. So you can get as close as you want. Or you can also photograph and then crop in when you're editing. Also, you could use colors. Look at the cool colors in these photographs, right? So this was a really fun quote that I found. It said, "Abstract art is not the creation of another reality, but the true vision of reality." So, I mean, we're photographing real objects, right? But we're looking at them in a different way, and we're making the viewers look at them in a different way as well. So let's take a look at your assignment sheet for this project. So let's talk about what you actually have to do. Abstract photography, something detached from physical, concrete reality. You're going to take 4 photographs that abstract your reality somehow. You have many options. You can choose to make reality non-recognizable, where you can't recognize any of it at all, or you could keep a small recognizable part but create something confusing or just not right in your images. A few ways that you can abstract your photos. You can get close. You could focus on textures, colors, shapes, forms, patterns, etc. Any of those elements that we talked about in that element project. You could use light and shadow. You could use motion. You can edit in your abstractions. You could use double exposures. You could use reflections. You could use extreme angles. There's a million other ways you could do this as well, so you don't have to stick to just those. Turn in 4 different abstract photographs. Edit them as you wish with what you have. In your post, include how you shot and edited your images and what you focused on for each photograph. Don't tell us what it is, really, though. Like, don't tell us, like, the actual subject of your photograph. That takes all the fun away. Let your viewer interpret the subject matter for themselves. This project was inspired by work that I saw you guys already do. So you have already been doing this since, like, the beginning of the semester. I remember even critiques in class where I'm like, you guys, we need to do an abstract project because you're already taking these really cool abstract photographs, right? So looking at the work that you guys have done has made me think that this would be a really fun project for us to experiment with, right? So I have put in Schoology a resource folder. Look at it, please. There's so many cool things in there, inspirations, ideas. It'll help you brainstorm, right? So look at that and come up with some cool stuff. And make sure that we post by our deadline, okay? And that we also critique by the critique deadline. I'm not going to make critique worth points. There's people, a lot of you, most of you are critiquing just fine right now. Like, I love the conversations we're having back and forth. You guys are making fantastic comments on other people's work. And I don't think it's necessary to make it worth points. I feel like those of you who are not participating in critique, the week I made it worth points, you still didn't participate in critique, so I'm not going to make that something that I have to do every week. So I expect you all to post your work, look at everybody else's work, comment on everybody else's work, scroll down to the bottom and make sure you're looking at the people who just posted who might not have any other, feedback and give them some feedback too. Okay, so have fun with this project. It's really open-ended and really a lot of fun. So take a lot of photos, edit and post your best ones, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out and let me know. All right, good luck, guys. Have